Oh, yeah. Oh, the new one I just sent, yes, and I have another one too that may be relevant to this group, so.
There's
City manager?
development drawing.
Cool. I haven't gotten a chance to meet the new. City manager, okay. I didn't get a text back on Desmond.
We thought everybody very carefully checked to make sure we were all available.
They do, but, you know, life happens.
Yeah. I was a half hour late once, I can't say a thing. Do these meetings shift back and forth between our building and the city?
No, well, they shift like annually, so we shift rather the city host or the county host on an annual basis, so we do it for a year and then we pass the baton. And they do it for a year, usually. It's kind of the tradition. I don't know if that's like, it's not actually written anywhere, but that's kind of the tradition.
Okay.
Just to share the love. Well, yeah, we might be off the hook here. We could do some information items. I don't know, I'm trying to see if we have anything. I guess there's nothing that we have to vote on. And I do think it would be worth it to at least continue to move forward and have some discussion so that our team can continue to keep the balls moving. So, I suppose that we will, I guess we can't approve minutes or we can't approve the agenda to even get started, can we?
We're in workshop mode, Madam Chair. I see that Wilma Fuentes has joined the conversation, however, she cannot be approved by the board either because we haven't adopted the changed into local yet, so we still don't have quorum.
Okay.
We do have enough if we have them between Captain Campbell and.
Right. So with 4-3 is quorum? Okay. Well, I guess that we could go into workshop mode where we don't necessarily adopt a formal agenda, but we'll just go through, and since everyone took the time and energy to be here, we'll go ahead and go forward with the updates on the various objects, and hopefully it might be that Desmond is just, you know, having trouble with parking or, you know, transportation. So we will move forward with the update. And before we do that, I guess maybe we could do a round of introductions because I don't think Dr. Campbell, who is on the call, I really won't be able to confirm her today, has met everybody. So if Catherine, if you're willing to take a minute to introduce yourself to the folks that are here, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
I'm Catherine Campbell. I'm Assistant Professor of Community Food Systems and State Extension Specialist. I'm in the Department of Family, Youth, and Community Sciences, and I've had the pleasure of working with a number of people who are on this call, including Commissioner Prizia, Carissa, and Kathleen over the years on issues related to community food systems and local food policy. And that's me. I'm happy to be here.
Catherine is the IFAS liaison for this board, hopefully, if she's confirmed today. So if we do get quorum, and if we don't, then we'll confirm her and Dr. Fuentes at the next meeting. So with that, Sean, I guess we'll pass it on to you for the update on the Foodshed Map.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me share my screen. I see we have on the line, Jessica Hayes and Eric Finley of UF Geoplan, and I'd really like to turn the presentation over to them. Eric, Jeff, did you all want to share your screen at all and guide us through what you've been able to produce so far with the Foodshed Map?
Yeah, sure. Be happy to do that.
Okay.
Excellent.
It looks like I can't share, right? Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. So we have been working with Sean McClendon and Chris Dawson and others from Alachua County for the past few months and putting together a database for the Foodshed Map, the Alachua County Foodshed Map. So what you're seeing here is just a basic map that we put together to show off some of the data that we've collected. And I'd just like to point out that Jessica Hayes with us today is responsible for the bulk of our data collection efforts. So thank you very much, Jessica. So before I, jump into the data, I'd just like to give a basic overview of our data collection process. So a few months back, Sean shared with us the white paper for the food systems map project. And in that white paper was a list of desired data points that will make up the Foodshed Map. So we basically took that list and kind of organized and created some groupings to help us with our data collection efforts, kind of provide a framework for our data collection. So some of those groupings you'll see over here on the left. So we have food production, food retail, facilities, gardens, and food assistance. And within each one of these categories is a list of GIS data layers that are contained in the database. And these data points specifically are just located within the food shed. So this purple boundary you're seeing here is the Alachua County food shed, a 15 county area surrounding Alachua County. And let me go ahead and jump into some of these categories. So food production, for example. Some of these layers. In food production, we have farms, cottage industries, apiaries, roasteries, breweries, and wineries. I can kind of go into the random area here. So if I click on a data point, this will bring up the table for that particular data point. And all of the layers you see here pretty much share the same table structure and the same information. We've got information in here, just the name and address, location of this particular farm. We also have information about sale location, if we can find it, contact info, links to web pages, different services that might be provided, and then also hours, if available, and then a bunch of yes/no designations, a bunch of fields for different crops or foods that are produced at that particular farm. Scrolling down, we've got some information on purchasing, things like there's online buying options, etc. Ownership information. Let's see, list of crops that might be produced at that particular farm. And then we have down towards the bottom, we also have this Google Map field, which I don't know if you'll actually be able to see this or not, but this will pop you out to the location in Google Maps, so you can get additional information about that location if needed. And so, like I said, all of these data points in this list will kind of share that same structure. We want to check out the breweries list. Let me turn on the legend for you. That might be a little bit easier.
And I just want to quickly, for those that weren't involved in the early stage of this project, let you know that the list of data points that we were gathering was generated by some folks that have knowledge of sort of the food systems first, and then it was sent out through the Food Systems Coalition in Gainesville to the network that's a part of that group, which includes farmers, it includes food assistance groups, it includes nonprofits that do community food work, it includes a few folks like the school board and others. And so a lot of people had a chance to kind of look at that list of data points that we are collecting. And then I think you're going to talk a little more about the user interface component that's coming next. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Me or them?
Them, I guess.
Sure.
So for instance, I do a lot of canning and I occasionally buy food in bulk from a vendor called USA Vegetables in Waldo Farmers and Flea Market. How would they be listed?
It's canning.
Oh, I do canning. I
Oh,
buy
you do? I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so I buy like bushels of sweet onions that I might not be able to buy
Mary,
here locally.
I can answer for that because they wouldn't probably know from a food system, because that person is a broker. So they're not growing that stuff. They're buying that stuff in bulk and selling it. So they would probably be listed as a broker if they're licensed as a broker and their data's in any of the databases that they kind of mine for this information. If it's not, I think the goal is eventually when we have a user interface that there'll be a way that people can submit their own information.
Okay.
If they want to be listed, then they would be able to be on there with their info, and they'd be able to fill out all those fields that exist, so that they could be listed on the
Right,
map.
but I mean, they do sell some local stuff. It's not all
Right, it's
local.
just not theirs,
it's-
right? So,
Yeah,
right, and if they were in a database somewhere as a location that sells fresh fruits and vegetables that they found when they were mining,
okay,
then they would be in here as a broker, most likely.
okay, gotcha. That's how I was
Right.
curious they would be. So if I was looking for that resource, how would I,
Right.
where would I find that? So it'd be under brokers.
Yeah, they're brokers, but
Okay.
it might be that we would list the Waldo flea market as a market that carries like produce,
Mhm.
and then there might be, and then under that, there might be a list of vendors or something like that eventually. I mean, I don't think we've gotten that far
Don't have it
because they
gotten that
haven't
far,
done
okay.
the user interface.
I was just curious. I was trying to think of things that,
That's a good point, though.
Uh-huh.
I'll write that down.
But Madam Chair, this is really a victory lap for
No, this is
UFG plan.
It's amazing.
What we would hope for is to take the input we had received from the community, especially for what they said was what was important in terms of the overall metadata, the tags that we should be thinking about, and that they return back such a wealth of information on a first pass.
Amazing.
Turned around and verified the information. There was a tremendous amount of effort that went into validation to the information that initially was put into the database, and to see it right now is extremely exciting. To
Absolutely.
be handed not only a data structure, but content that we now will be taking on over at Growth Management and polishing and putting the user interface, the more refined thing that people can more easily scroll through or maybe sift and sort the information on their own desktop.
So this is, I love that this is a multi-county area here. How is this resource going to be able to be utilized by folks outside of Alaska County?
They'll be able to access the link and use it like any other person in the World Wide Web. So,
yeah, I want to say a huge thank you to Eric and to Jessica for all the work to do this. Like,
Yeah, this
it's
is amazing.
fantastic to see so much data so quickly. I had no idea that we'd be able to pull off so much so quickly, and it's really encouraging and exciting. And I think, only the opportunities to already get this up and get it live and be able to have that as a tool that anyone can use, but also am excited about what people are, when the people see this, what it's gonna catalyze in terms of a conversation in our community. So thank you so much for all the hard work, Jessica and Eric and all the folks at GeoPlan that contributed. This is really powerful.
Well, yeah, thanks so much. We had a great time too in helping to put this together. I would just like to point out some of the major data sources for the different layers that we have in here are USDA, FDACS, and of course the Food Systems Coalition. So really that kind of helped us provide sort of the skeleton, and it'll just be interesting to see how it works once the user interface is going and users themselves can input data and become part of that verification process also.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to future collaborations. I hope that we can think about other ways to collaborate with the GeoPlan in terms of data updating and also in terms of, conversations about analyzing the data, because I think from a user interface, I'm very excited about getting it out there for people to use and to find resources and things that they're looking for, but I'm also excited about the opportunity to overlay this information with information like, health disparities in our county or access to healthy food in our area, and then be able to use that to identify key areas where we can strategically begin to invest in projects and programs and an infrastructure to support the expansion of our food system. So this is very exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to applaud.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we have as part of the collaboration with is it NeoPlan? GeoPlan, I apologize. And I'm kind of new to the food system work, so forgive me for not knowing this already. But should our citizens have other suggestions for categories? Is that something we can go back and add later? Wonderful.
So we'll take the time period between now and the first part of the new year to, again, refine the front end of this and ask questions and test it. See if we're missing something, see if we've forgotten something, begin to maybe take on some initial waves of input from the community into it and see how it functions and works. So we'll go through a testing period with it. But in talking to, GeoPlan and also talking with Dr. Krista Court for the U.S. Economic Impact Analysis Program, we're very excited. We think that this is something, the composition of the data, what it's showing, I believe this is something unique for Florida. There are maps that do singularly some of these databases, but they don't do exactly what we have accomplished today. And it's very exciting to think about what those overlays of information might be and the questions we could begin to ask of it. Its utility is probably fairly immediate for us as well. And we hope to make use of it for coming grant opportunities with the USDA.
Absolutely. So great.
How granular will the data eventually get? What are you thinking? Like, for instance, if I owned an Asian restaurant and I wanted to find local sources of Asian produce, would that be the level that we would be able to search?
I hope so. That's
Okay,
the hope.
so that's
Yeah.
the level of granularity that we're
Absolutely.
looking at.
I mean, I think that the really, and Eric, I should let you speak to this more than anything, because you all are the data gurus, but the data is only as good as what's in the databases, and so when it comes to stuff like that, we would really be relying on the farmers to be inputting, because there may be that we could see an Asian vegetable grocery, or we could see a farm that says like it sells Asian vegetables, and then that would be on the map. But if it's not in there, like when they're using USDA data or FDACS data, they may not get to the level of calling them Asian greens. It might just say like bok choy, and so if they searched Asian greens, they might not find it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just going to be a little bit of some of those search terms and how people use it and what we see people need and the ways in which things get categorized, and I think that will get refined over time.
Yeah, like maybe check boxes versus people filling it in,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And that'll be our big next step, is figuring out what needs to be a radio button or a checkbox, or so we'll be working with growth management to figure out all those interface points.
That's awesome.
So
Great.
a lot of the finer details, so for some of those fields that list what crops are provided, for example, that's information that we didn't necessarily get from USDA or FDACS. In some cases we did, but for the most part, that is just information we verified from the web or from Google Maps and those kinds of resources. So,
That is,
so there's going to be, you know, a lot of potential here with what you're seeing today. Maybe we don't have everything covered for a lot of data sets, or I'm sorry, a lot of data points you see here.
well, it's a work in progress for sure.
Exactly, certain information that could be filled in the future.
Thank you very much. It's very, very exciting, and I'm excited to see those other, you know, maybe the opportunity to add. How easy, from your perspective, I guess this is a question both for staff and for our team at the county, and also is it to do those overlays, like to create where we would have like other layers that people could click on, like the food deserts from the USDA, or health equity data from the health department, or things like that, to overlay those kinds of layers on a map like this?
I think that's not too much of a lift. I think that's definitely something we could do.
Very cool. So exciting. Are there any other questions?
We have two raised hands, Carissa Raskin and then Kathleen Pagan, Madam Chair.
Great. Carissa, you want to go first?
I can, but in fairness, Kathleen had her hand raised first. So my kindergarten rules tell me no, she goes first.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Carissa, it's all right. We
Okay.
didn't have Zoom in kindergarten.
That's very true. That is an accurate statement. Okay. Well, I just wanted to thank Eric and the team and Sean for putting this together. This is extremely exciting, as everyone has said. From, you know, my perspective of working on some grants that call for this type of data, it's really challenging to pull it all together without it, you know, mapped, and a really good asset. And appreciative of seeing the Food System Coalition volunteer members' hard work come to life literally before our eyes. Just a couple of things that I just wanted to throw out for awareness. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to partner with Alachua County Public Schools, as they have data from the Good Food Purchasing Program that will drill down a little bit into some of the sourcing that we may not have captured when the Food Systems Coalition members were kind of ad hoc working on gathering this data a few years ago. Also, I'm appreciative, Eric, that you mentioned that the data was kind of ad hoc put together, at least from the Food Systems Coalition. So just for, you know, for what it's worth, you know, this is, well, at least what we contributed, it may not all be up to date, especially considering it was gathered pre-COVID. So that may have shifted things, just for people's awareness. And then let's see, I did want to also mention that there was a food hub feasibility study done recently by a UF PhD student that has some really, to Commissioner Alford's question, drilled down data regarding what the farmers locally, well, actually regionally, are producing. And so we can make those connections to add further detailed data. And finally, Commissioner Prizia just requested or asked about overlaying with data related to health and equities. And there was a map produced by Dr. Bruce Waite not too far in the past that utilized the Neighborhood Deprivation Index, which is a overlaid map of multiple social determinants of health. And I believe that he would be very willing to present, you know, his findings from his past work and work very collaboratively with you all to add that health disparities data from a neighborhood deprivation index standpoint. So I just wanted to make note of that so we can have it on record and move forward together to have those integrated. I think this is a tremendous undertaking. So thank you.
So exciting. Excellent. Are there any other questions or comments?
Kathleen?
Oh, yes, Kathleen Pagan. Sorry, I apologize, Kathleen.
That's
When I
fine.
can't see you all, we don't have a screen where like we see the participants while we're looking at the screen, so I keep missing you.
Well, since Carissa mentioned Dr. Waite's map, there's also the US Census now has maps of social determinants of health criteria that we could look at. But I also wanted to ask, since the coastal counties are included, there is an aquaculture industry at Cedar Key.
Yep.
Should we include aquaculture? We also heard a presentation at the most recent Food Systems Coalition meeting by a UF faculty who was considering a grant to study the potential for aquaculture. You know, that may be subject to funding, but moving forward, there could be other aquaculture industries. I'm sure there's some on the Atlantic.
That was absolutely in the list, and that's part of the reason why the Foodshed spreads to the coast, because we tried to capture an area where we could get the majority of our dietary needs met. So, you know, proteins, both fish and chicken, beef, any of the, you know, as well as plant proteins, beef, dairy, vegetable, but, you know, the majority of your food diet could be met from this area, and that was sort of the impetus for that. So absolutely, and I do see that may be an area that, you know, because we were looking at Fish and Wildlife or the fisheries data, we were looking at USDA data, which doesn't capture much of that because most of it's regulated by Fish and Wildlife. We probably we'll just need to think about that as we continue to refine the data. But that's a really great point, Kathleen. All right, we're gonna, in the interest of time, we're gonna move on, and I think up next is the Healthy Corner Store Collaboration Model presentation and discussion. I believe Dr. Houchin is taking this one on. So are you able to share your screen?
I think Sean is gonna move us along. So what we prepared for you today was really just a preliminary presentation so we could launch the conversation on the Healthy Corner Store initiative by talking about what a collaborative model for working with corner store owners would look like in order to create a larger pilot project and then a more sustainable project. So what I'm presenting to you are these ideas that we have around this collaborative model. We'll ask for your feedback on those ideas, work that up a little bit more, have to finalize a budget for that collaborative work plan, and then move into a pilot phase for the Healthy Corner Store project, and then a larger project. So I just wanted to be clear about all those steps. Sean, if you would. So the idea is to establish this working group that would really be a participatory approach to developing this pilot by working with corner store owners on what a pilot would look like, what that plan would look like, and that process in order to make it most effective. So we are not coming to them with a model that says, hey, would you do this? And then have no adoption because we don't have the input and buy-in that we need, either from the corner store owners or from the communities that they serve. And of course, the purpose of the project, the Healthy Corner Store Initiative, would be to provide healthy options of food at local corner stores, particularly in the communities in Alachua County that face the kinds of health inequities that we've been talking about, as well as income inequities and other inequities that we might find out. There's a synergy between between those inequities as we build out this map and other issues and other initiatives related to equity that are really going to show those intersections and how those inequities compile. Our idea, and this is one of the things that we'd love to hear your feedback on, is that working group would consist of 2 or 3 corner store owners or managers, county staff. I believe that most likely would be myself and Sean, potentially city staff, and if possible, 1 or 2 citizen volunteers, particularly from those communities that we're hoping to work most effectively with. You all would recommend, initially, certainly be recommending to us corner stores themselves or broad locations to recruit participants to this project, as well as any number of things we're going to ask you to shape for us as we go through the proposal and plan. So our suggestion is to do a fairly quick process to move this along and not spend a whole bunch of time working with these corner store owners, because we still have a pilot phase and another phase. So the idea is to meet approximately 5 times with these corner store owners and in this working group to introduce the idea, to really allow the corner store owners to tell us their concerns, their needs, what incentives they may have, priorities for the projects and desires. I mean, I was thinking a couple of days ago after visiting these corner store owners, wouldn't it be neat if corner store owners made suggestions to us, like, I'd love to see a community cleanup of my corner store. That's a desire I have, and that would be something that isn't about the healthy corner stores, but would certainly benefit the community, the owner, and the county and the city as well. So who knows what might come up that's tangentially related, but can be worked into the project if we ask early enough. So the idea is that together, this working group would come back to this council with a pilot model, a cost. Now, ultimately, we would be providing, we meaning you all, would be providing the parameters around what this project could cost. But should it exceed that, potentially there's matches. There are other ways to find funding. So we would be generating some desire around a cost, a potential budget for this project, and the budgetary needs as identified by this working group, as well as technical issues related to merchandising and point of sales and food options that are available in the store, a cost-benefit analysis. And the other broad part would be some model for consumer feedback and participatory feedback for this pilot process and the larger process going forward. The managers know best how to talk with their customers. Now, Sean and I took a trip visiting one small quadrant of Alachua County, a number of the grocery stores in that quadrant. So the next couple of slides are images from that grocery store, those grocery stores. Essentially, we drove down Waldo Road, took a right on 8th Avenue, went up into the Duval area, up to about Duval Elementary School, came back, went down Waldo Road to where West Coast Seafood is, and around that area, turned around, came back, and went up through Hawthorne Road. And as many grocery corner stores as we found in that small area, we stopped and visited, took pictures. Sean brilliantly made a map of the locations, and we kind of just, our larger goal was to get an understanding of corner store culture. You know, I'm from New York, which has a very, very strong bodega culture. And Alachua County has a corner store culture. If you ask my 16-year-old son, he'll tell you he loves corner stores. It's just a different thing than, especially, you know, according to where you are in the town. And it was neat to see the people talking with us and who, like, knew if you were from that area or not. I mean, we had people like, you don't live right here. But not in a mean way. This was their corner store. So I think we need to be respectful of that culture and build off of it, because these really are front doors into some of these communities, these corner stores. They're cool places. So we want to enhance them, not dramatically change that culture that's already there. Outside of that, we inventoried the goods that were in the store, in each of the stores, just very briefly. And I'll say that Sean's already at West Coast Seafood, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about that store. But there are, like, culturally specific items in probably 6 out of 8 of the stores we visited. And by culturally specific items, I'm talking about pickled eggs and pickles and peanuts and T-shirts and do-rags. And what that tells me is that folks are able to make some decisions with regard to their inventory that is not just standard. So broadening that culturally specific inventory is very possible and very real. And folks, and the corner store owners certainly are responding to the needs to some extent of the community, or they wouldn't have those specific items. It would just be Doritos at every store. So Sean, I'm gonna let you, Sean took pictures and added them to the PowerPoint. I believe all 4 of these pictures are from West Coast Seafood, which is the largest, corner store, if we want to consider that we visited, and I think for us has the most potential to become more of a local market, less of a corner store experience. I mean, there's just physical space in West Coast Seafood that's underused, as well as local meats and local fish, says the woman who loves buying goat meat from there. So there's just a lot of possibility, I think, at West Coast Seafood to be kind of the ideal experience, or the large end of what this project could look like, as well as certainly enhancing some of those smaller stores that are very essential for communities. I will say that the first image, I'm going all the way back, that image right there. So that corner store is in the Duval neighborhood. It's probably less than a mile from Duval Elementary School. And it's really dark on the inside and dirty, quite frankly. And while we were, it's the first corner store we visited. While we were there, no less than 3 children, unaccompanied, went into that store and bought some stuff on behalf of their family or maybe their own money. And I have no judgment on the fact that they're unaccompanied. What I am saying is that's an essential store in this community. So it's somebody that I really would love to see us work with, because our babies are using that store. I think I'll stop talking now. Sean, was there anything you wanted to add that I didn't say about West Coast or any of the pictures so far?
No, just the amount of engagement with the community. I mean, there was very active market participation. And this was at roughly 4:30 or so on a weekday afternoon. High turnover of traffic, foot traffic coming in, people pulling up in the cars, getting out, grabbing something, going back. So these aren't underutilized store spaces at all. They are well used and well loved in the community, I think, across the board. And regardless of whether they're offering gasoline out front, we were seeing lots and lots of traffic moving in through the store, or just hanging out in the store, just neighborhood folks at the store as well. So these are also, centers for the community. I was really impressed with West Coast Seafood. It definitely has that sense of what could potentially be culturally appropriate options at a much more mature scale of operation. So a lot of lessons, I think, to be learned in what is being offered here in terms of, the spices and fruits and vegetables and this other kind of foodstuffs that work in the community, because these operations have survived.
They've been known for having specialty food products for a while. If you needed anything for Cajun cooking, they used to have, I don't know if they still do, a whole shelf of stuff sourced obviously from Louisiana. So it was, I've been in there a few times for stuff like that.
So some of the other options that existed in the community didn't have quite the same breadth and range of food choice. They were more typical of a convenience store operation. They still had things that were for sale that were more culturally appropriate to their neighborhood, that made them unique, but you wouldn't find in any kind of I-75 destination going to another corner store. But there's still opportunities, and there were still other, like Mr. Shark's, with at a certain scale, you were seeing similar offerings of meats and cuts in the community. And again, high traffic area.
Yeah, it was the first time that I had ever gone to Mr. Shark's,
Yeah, I
and
didn't even,
Yeah, where is that? I'm trying
that's
to
on,
picture it.
it's on Hawthorne Road, it's on the, I don't know, east or west, left if you're headed out on Hawthorne Road. East, thank you. And it's phenomenal, it's beautifully clean, they make the food quick, like that is gonna be, if it isn't already, a booming commercial operation. And the fish choice in there, frankly, is a better choice than you get at West Coast Seafood, you know, and it's a newer store, so I expect it to be a staple here for quite some time.
Does it smell better than West Coast?
It absolutely does, and they sell plates or, you know, styrofoam containers of crab, et cetera, that you can buy, as well as the fresh fish. Imagine if they were able to sell some vegetables there as well. That would just be a really neat experience. Or value-added products as well.
You do your whole crab boil.
Right, yeah. And I think the only thing that, would you mind going back one thing? So we included the Circle K in the pictures, and we visited there knowing that the possibility of collaborating with Circle K was very limited. However, if you compare the healthy food options in Circle K to the other stores, I won't say it's night and day, but it's certainly dawn and midday. In that, Circle K has got fruit cups and, you know, a refrigerated section right in the middle where you can get these healthier food options. They're not local, certainly, but they're healthier. So I'd love to compete with that at the other stores and provide that same kind of variety and at least those kinds of options for our local consumers.
Did you guys go to the store that's next to Gainesville Seafood and Chicken, or Chicken and Seafood? They're next to that new retirement place that just went up
I know.
on University Avenue, not on.
East University.
Yes, we didn't get that far.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
That appears to be locally owned, so I wasn't sure.
Okay.
That's 2,300. Okay.
I don't believe we got to that store. Sean, am I missing it?
I don't think so.
I thought it might be that one farther down on East University Avenue.
No, I think the one that we went on East University was right there by, where you would turn for Lake Forest.
Sunrise.
Yeah.
Good earrings.
But this is the first of
Okay.
many trips we hope to take. We
Yeah.
covered one very specific area that certainly fell within the parameters of people who have disparities in Alachua County. And we look forward to hearing your feedback on where else we should go. Finally, you know, the next steps, just to launch the conversation that we know need to be considered, is this timeline for creating this working group. You know, how quickly can we move forward with that by getting your feedback today? What kind of compensation we would want to provide to those grocery store owners and potentially citizens who would be involved in that working group? And then certainly we'll have to discuss the budget for the pilot effort and the budget for the larger project moving forward. I don't believe we're prepared to fully have that conversation today, but we recognize that it's outstanding and it needs to be decided first. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. This is great. I really appreciate it.
I have an idea.
When you,
Oh, go ahead.
okay, would you mind going back to the very beginning really quickly? I just want to, like, the participatory approach slide. Perfect. So when you're asking for a timeline, the first part you're talking about is sort of this working group, the corner stores and the citizen volunteers and the staff kind of getting together to start brainstorming. Okay. And,
Where's the supplier in there?
I hadn't considered that.
sorry, go ahead, Mary. I guess I'll open it up for questions.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I just was looking at it and you were listing those things, and to me, that one of the things that we would, if we could kill more than one bird with one stone, right? So if we were to, for instance, we purchased the foods that we would like to see sold initially, just to get it started, from our local food vendors like CSAs, and then allowed the vendors at the corner stores to just make the profit off of that and to sort of see how it worked. I don't know, just an idea. That would be, then we could connect the vendor with the market.
Yeah.
And, you know, start going down the path of seeing what works and what.
Yeah, we might. I mean, I think
idea.
that, to me, like, this idea of listening to the commercials about what they want and need, because they may want to have those direct marketing business relationships to begin with, so that they can pick and choose what's fresh that week and what's
but I'm just saying
relevant to
we would buy it, right? So,
or we would pay them, we would give them a grant to buy it.
or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, so we're making sure that both.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what we do, right, we are gonna have to provide funding to make this thing go, because if they were going to do it of their own accord, they would have already done it, right? They would already.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely incentives that need to be had, and I think this conversation, I hope, will get to what are those incentives. Would they rather us give them a grant for food purchases, or would they rather buy that stuff and get a grant to put in a new cooler, so that they can house that food? Or do they want, you know, marketing assistance and a new point of sale system? Or do they want a cleanup out front and a facade grant to do
Or all of
signage?
it, or all of the
those.
above, right?
Exactly.
Because some of those things could come from, you know, the CRA or
Exactly.
whatever.
And
But
that's,
we could just create the opportunity for them to learn and use all of those things.
do you mind stopping sharing the screen for a moment so we can see people's hands? And what I'll do is, at this point, I'll open it up to the team for if there are questions about the presentation and not so much this dialogue, sorry, but the presentation.
Sorry, I just
That's
jumped
okay.
into things.
That was had. Are there any quick questions off the bat with regard to the approach or thoughts about the pilot approach? I see Carissa's hand up. Carissa?
Sorry, I unraised my hand but didn't unmute. So I think the presentation was really informative. So I'm grateful to the county's team for putting that together. I'm also curious kind of how the presentation that Brandy put together and presented at the last month might be thought about in as we're working to develop a methodology, just because we know that there are some models that have been tried in other places, and things that have had some success and not success, and really looking at the different models and talking about our scale is going to be key, I think, in the beginning, to understand, you know, the scope of what it is that we're trying to take on. And I think Brandy, from having reached out and had, you know, conversations with people who have run some of these programs, some of which have failed and some of which have succeeded, just a lot of lessons to be learned about the tried models. So I just want to make sure that, you know, there's a lot of data that we can look at as well.
So,
How that fits in.
yeah, do you?
Sure. I did my best to incorporate, although I didn't cite those specific models, some of those ideas, many of those ideas, and what we proposed in terms of the collaborative working group. I have to be honest and say I lean toward the New York bodega model because that's so culturally situated, as well as that model from Miami. Both of those worked in communities of color, which I think are the same communities we're having. We are talking about here in Alachua County, not exclusively, certainly not exclusively when we think about the rural areas, but I'd be happy, I'm willing to, and I think I should go back and look through those models much more, so that when we bring the next version of this presentation before this council, we've incorporated those details and really learned from those successes and even potential failures as this idea progresses. I just wanted to give us the broadest plan right now, so that this board can inform it, and then we'll go back and make it much more detailed. But thank you, Brandy, for your work. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say too, to that point, that I think that as you all embark on this conversation with the store owners, the presentation of what's worked and not worked in other areas and examples that you all can provide, to get their imagination sparked and to get them thinking about the kinds of things they could ask for, because I think oftentimes, you know, in these scenarios when you're going out in a community, it takes a little bit of like framing the possibility, you know, and giving people a little bit of examples. So I think that Brandy's presentation will probably be very helpful in that regard as well, in terms of providing those store owners, because some of them will have ideas and maybe we can, you know, if you know that that hasn't worked in another area or what has failed in the other area, then that group can brainstorm how to ensure, if that's really what they want, how it doesn't fail here, right? So I think having that data is going to be really critical in that working group dialogue that's had. With regards to scale, which was a conversation that was had last time, and I think you brought it up a little bit when you mentioned Circle K, you know, versus the local corner store. You know, I know we're only workshopping today, we can't make any formal decisions. I'll just say that in my vision of this, when I put it forward as a policy initiative, I really envision it being locally owned stores, because my goal, locally owned and operated stores, meaning privately owned, family owned, you know, small, independently owned businesses, because I see it as not only an opportunity to build local food access and healthy food access in our communities, but also an opportunity to build economic development for our locally owned businesses. And I'm not super interested in giving grants to corporations that have, you know, just because they have a chain here, when that money is going to end up moving out of our county and not, I mean, some of it will get recirculated if they're buying from our local farmers, so there is still benefit there. I'm not saying there's not benefit there, but the amount of lift that it takes to get corporate approval and get their buy-in, and you know, and the level of impact that it has, I think is diminished the further up that food chain in terms of corporate ownership you go. So my dream and interest was in the smaller, independent, locally owned businesses for an approach, but I definitely would love to hear from the other committee members and then, you know, and the community about that idea versus, you know, sort of the Dollar General and Circle K model versus Mr. Shark and the Duval Market model. But I definitely think they're different approaches. Anybody, Mary or Catherine or any of the visitors, do you all have any comments on that?
I kind of feel like the corporately owned stores need to be addressed in a different way. Like we could, that's like different policy. Like if you want to build this store here and sell these things, then we need you to do these things too.
Right, like that's more of a code and zoning and.
Right, I think it's a different approach than working with the local folks. That's kind of how I see it, because they're used to dealing in that world.
Yeah.
You know, that give and take, get what we want.
Right, agreed.
Kind of world, so.
Catherine, any comments?
Yeah, I was having that same thought. I think, you know, including them, but in a different way, and definitely not, you know, funneling funds towards them. But I think as much as we can do, given that they are in the communities, to help encourage them to make these changes as well would be valuable.
So we can't read comments from this far in the meeting. So if that's for Sean, that's great. But if it's a comment to the whole committee, you probably will have to raise your hand and actually say it out loud, just so that we hear you. Because otherwise I can't read it. You're too far away.
Gotcha. I was just mentioning that, and just in thinking about the stores corporate versus local, sometimes we have locally owned stores that are part of a franchise, so they have the brand name attached to them, but they don't actually receive any other support from a corporation, a large corporation. They're still small, independently owned, locally owned businesses. And so this is a workshop, so we're not making any decisions, but I just want to throw that out there as that it's kind of like that gray area, just for consideration.
I agree with you, although I will say it isn't completely independently owned because they have a franchise license, so they have to buy and use certain things and brand certain things, but it is still independent. I mean, it's still owned locally, so
I believe there's some metrics out there for measuring the localness of various things. Maybe we could, you know, eventually adopt something like that as a way of judging how local a store is.
There was a comment from the community. Do you want to come up? You'll have to come up to the microphone so folks can hear you. you introduce yourself? It's not those, it's that, so you don't have to worry about those.
Oh, okay. Nancy Darren, just two quick comments on that. I know one of the metrics is 51%, the ability to make decisions, so it's like a 51% control over decision-making.
Yep.
But I think your point in how to incorporate that multiplier effect is really, really important, because we need to start looking at those layers of circular economy ever more so. So I
Absolutely.
really appreciate that, and that was fantastic.
I know, very excited.
The way you're starting about it, thank you so much.
How much, so we have another comment or question at the, Kathleen?
Captain Campbell.
Yes, I just wanted to comment, if you think of the public housing at Woodland Park, which is near the intersection of Southeast 4th and Williston Road, there is a Chevron at Williston Road. There's also, according to Google, a business called Monique's Candyland. The name would imply not the healthiest retail, but those are probably the only options within walking distance of that public housing area. So that's just another metric to consider if we're looking at locations, where people are food insecure and maybe have no transportation.
Okay, I'm gonna, hold on one second. I'm gonna get Catherine to comment before we get into, before we move on to locations, because we were a little bit still on the scale thing, I think, and I don't know if Catherine's comment was regarding that. Dr. Campbell?
Yeah, I actually was, I put in the chat, and I didn't realize you all couldn't see it over there. I was just suggesting using the Nutrition Environment Measures Survey. There's a special one for corner stores, which would allow for objective comparisons of the different stores, and would also allow you to assess before and after the pilot, the sort of changes and impact on the nutrition environment. And I put in the chat links to the protocol for using that and the PDF of the instrument. So
Thank you.
I was just suggesting that as a possibility.
Great. And we will download the chat, so we'll get those things. We just can't see them from here. So thank you for calling those out.
May I make a comment on scale before we move on?
Yeah.
We visited a Chevron on the corner of Hawthorne Road and on University Avenue. I don't know what the name of I think it's called Food Mart, but it's also a Chevron gas station. And there were a number of culturally specific local items in that Chevron. So I just wonder, and I'm very familiar with the Chevron by Woodland Park, and that too has a lot of diversity from your average Chevron. So that we may want to think about Chevron specifically. It seems as though there's something about them.
Well, and Chevron may be the gas that they sell, so they have to buy a franchise of a gas in order to sell gasoline. But the store itself, to Carissa's point, might be independently owned and operated. And so, the majority of the decisions about what's in the store are made by that store owner. But the gasoline and the branding of the gasoline and the pricing of the gasoline and the buying of the gasoline have to come through Chevron. So, and that may be a line that we draw. I would certainly be comfortable with something like that, because I'm certainly not getting any local gasoline. Like that.
Well,
Thank God.
That's what I think about that place by Gainesville Chicken and Seafood, right? They have a franchise, but that store is obviously locally.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think exploring some of those things, a little bit deeper with, with the owners. I think the level, like as you're saying, that sort of the level of ownership and decision-making power they have. And, if we have to run it up a food chain, no pun intended, in order for a decision to be made about whether they participate, we kind of know we're in a place where.
Well, it's like alcohol and cigarettes. They sell gas to survive.
Right.
And so it's.
Right. So to locations, if we're okay, are we ready to move on from scale? Does everyone feel like we kind of have a sense of direction? Do you all as a team feel, okay?
Yeah.
Locations, beyond, they went to this Duval area, which I think is a really critical area. It's one of the areas that we have identified, with the longer term potential project of sort of a grocery store. And so certainly that's an area. I love, Kathleen, your suggestion of exploring public housing and, proximity to public housing, particularly because many of those folks also have transportation challenges. Many kids live there, so they can get access to these. So that's a great, and I think that's actually the case with the Duval store that they mentioned. A lot of the kids are coming from the public housing that's kind of diagonally across the street. So I really like that as an indicator. I would love to see us incorporate at least one rural store owner, because I think their needs are going to be a lot different than, an urban store owner, in terms of what they might carry. They might carry more things because people can get into town to the grocery store less often. But that's my only comment. Do people have other thoughts or comments about that from the board?
I think Waldo would be a fabulous place to look.
Waldo?
Yeah, because, I can't think of a grocery store there.
There's definitely no one.
Yeah, because like Archer has the, food, whatever, the little Save-A-Lot, right? And, Newberry, Hawthorne has Hitchcock's.
Hawthorne has Hitchcock's, Alachua has Hitchcock's, High Springs has sort of Hitchcock's.
So I don't know, that was
Yeah.
what popped into my head.
Yeah, or the unincorporated area of Alachua County. I mean, my thinking was that we look at the unincorporated areas where people aren't even in the town, like they don't even have access.
Oh, right.
Like the gas stations that are between Hawthorne and
I was just
Rock
thinking,
Creek, like
I
that,
was just thinking of that
that
one.
whole eastern part of our county is such a giant part of our county, and it has almost nothing, but there's a fair amount of population out there. But it's a pretty vast area, so identifying, a store in that region. Another area, could be the southwest part of our community, but I mean, I do think there's a lot of grocery store access on the southwest side, but I don't know in terms of walkability,
Right.
when it comes to a lot of that, because everything is so car-centric on the west side, or there are communities over there, that could utilize more.
I think in the denser, neighborhoods too, there's unlicensed corner stores where people are selling a lot of goods out of their living rooms. And, that's another conversation I think we should talk about too.
I'm not interested in policing.
I'm not interested either. My question is actually more is what barriers are there to allowing people to do that? What barriers are there to having fruit and vegetable stands? That's something that I would like to see, is removing the barriers that allow people to sell food.
I'll put that on a future agenda.
Yeah.
Maybe a future agenda could be a conversation around, we had growth management come and talk about some of the, the benefits, but maybe at a future agenda, I'm probably not, maybe the next one or December, we could, if they have the time, we could have them come and just talk about what are some of the potential things like that, like barriers we could list, or ideas that we, what are some of the examples that are happening in other communities, like around, what do we have in terms of barriers to vegetable stands, food trucks? They talked a little bit about that, but we didn't really get into a dialogue about the details.
So, Madam Chair, is the question for growth management to expand on their last presentation, because the last presentation was really dealing with what are the barriers to a corner store,
Yeah.
Right.
which is a much different model from, I think, the more kind of informal retail options, to summarize.
Yeah.
Is there an ideal condition of that kind of informal retail that you think barriers need to be lifted from, or do you use general parameters of why those barriers exist, if they do?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I guess I'm more interested in like what barriers exist for more informal retail in residential areas. I know the state level ones, and so I'm not asking them to get into the food safety side of things, but from a what we regulate standpoint, like the the zoning, you know, like where food trucks are allowed, where they're not allowed, where, you know, are there any barriers to having a food vendor that drives around? Are there any barriers to having a fruit and vegetable stand on a
In your
street
front
corner?
yard, in a neighborhood. Like, I could go to Waldo, buy a bunch of bushels of stuff, take them back, sell them in my neighborhood. What would, you know, what prevents me from doing that?
Besides having a business license and
Right.
using your, yeah, like all, like that sort of thing.
So, Madam Chair, Kathleen Pagan's on the line here, so I think, we're looking for, what are the barriers for alternative vending food service type, opportunities outside of a corner store?
And that's, I mean, I do think it's for a future agenda, because I don't want us to get too far off of our goals. I mean, we have set goals, and I don't want us to get too far off, and so, and I don't want to give staff a rabbit hole to go down and give them work for the work's sake. So if folks are okay with us, maybe even putting that off until the new year when we're a little further along with this project. But I think it's worth a conversation to look at what are those barriers, because if we can relieve some of those, we may, you know, there may be other options to fill some of those corner store gaps where they don't exist, so.
We could at least decriminalize it.
Yeah. Locations, I'm mindful of time at 6:39. Are there, beyond locations, are there any other thoughts on locations from the committee, from Catherine?
Wilma Fuentes, that's your hand up.
Vilma? Dr. Fuentes?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you. I've been here quietly listening, processing everything, and so my apologies if I'm chiming in a little bit late. So I just want to make two quick comments. One, in response to this conversation that was going on about whether working with a franchise, no franchise, whether they're locally owned, this whole idea of a Healthy Corner Stores initiative can certainly be phased in. And so it seems wisest that phase one would be working through the types of corner stores that were already identified in the presentation. And then perhaps there could be a phase, if that is successful and based on whatever is learned from that experiment or that pilot, then other types of, franchises or such, it can be incorporated into the project in the future. But I'm still, I always go back to why are some of the communities in our area, in our county, not eating more healthy foods, more fruits, more vegetables? And one of them could be that they're simply not available within walking distance or in a manner that's easily accessible to them. But another might be that people in those areas, for whatever reason, historic, cultural, are not accustomed to eating healthy foods. So for instance, take any one of these corner stores, especially the one that was featured at the very beginning in Duval neighborhood. If we suddenly started, giving them free apples, blueberries, whatever, would people in those communities necessarily start eating them?
I can actually answer that question, because we
Please,
work
I'd
with
love
the
to.
Duval Neighborhood Association, and they actually started purchasing produce from local farmers and getting produce from other vendors, kind of broker style, and offering it for free on a table in their community, and it is gone in like minutes.
Okay.
So the answer to that question is a yes, for sure.
Okay, so that's encouraging. I'm just thinking, through the years, having gone, to eat lunch with my kids in the public schools, and, they could get free meals and they can include the free fruits and vegetables, and much of that goes into the garbage. And so I think, I know this is not the focus of the discussion, but there should be at least a related discussion about education and how we can, whatever the initiative is, certainly if there's a Healthy Corner Foods initiative, if there could be another education component as a corollary to that, it might be worthwhile to invest some time and effort into that.
Absolutely. All right.
May I ask for a clarification on location? Would it be okay to ask the Rural Advisory Committee as well as the Alachua County Community Remembrance Project, which have a number of for suggestions?
Absolutely.
That's a great idea.
These are advisory boards. That's why we have them. That's great. That would be fabulous. We can also, if you don't get any good nominations, or if people feel reticent, we can also send we could, the county could certainly send a chair letter to our other municipalities to ask for, you know, nominations or recommendations. That's another thing that we could do if needed. All right, timeline you asked about, and so I do want to quickly address that. Yesterday, no, I'm just kidding. I'm joking, I'm joking, but I would love to see things move as quickly as they can. I know that we're coming into the holiday season. It's going to be hard to get people's attention and time. But if there was a possibility of doing an initial meeting, identifying the store owners and kind of getting an initial meeting on the calendar before we get into the holiday season, I would love to see that happen. Does that seem realistic to you all?
I think we at least need one more meeting before you to finalize the model, and to adopt the model. And then and at that same time, we'll be visiting these other stores that we get locations about and bringing that information to you. And then we would have a pool that you would be able to select those potential participants from. So I feel as though we're two meetings out, which sounds like 2 months out, which sounds like January rather than before the holidays, unfortunately.
I don't know that okay. I guess I don't necessarily feel that there's a need to, I mean, we had general consensus on the idea of a participatory model early on, and we still have it today. I'm not sure that we need a formal adoption of the model to move forward with doing the work. I definitely think that when it comes to sort of budgetary implications and things like that, we definitely do need buy-in from the whole board, because I want to make sure that, you know, if we're going to be leaning on the county's ARP resources or CRA dollars from both sides of the street, that there's consensus on that, and we're taking it back to our boards to ask for those funding and resources. But when it comes to the model, I don't know. How do people feel about that? To me, it doesn't feel like something. I mean, it feels like a general consensus that we all agree that the participatory model is the way to go about this. I don't know that there was, and I mean, I felt like Raina actually said that was actually one of Raina's points and Desmond's points at our last meeting in particular. So I don't know that I feel like there's a need to get a formal approval. Mary?
I kind of agree. I feel like we have, we're just refining the model at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but all that to say, I mean, still, if there's, the steps that need to happen between now and the new year, I hear you, loud and clear, but
that whole legal side of creating a memorandum of understanding or whatever it is that we have with the store owners and all of that kind of work, that can get pretty intense.
Yeah.
We have the legal guy in here.
Eventually. Yeah. So I guess from a timeline perspective, I would say that I feel like we can move forward as soon as you all have the bandwidth and that we feel like the store owners have the bandwidth to participate in the process and get that moving. But if we do want to pay the store owners for all of that participation or have some kind of compensation, then we would have to bring back before the board. So maybe some of those initial, as you're saying, some of that initial outreach, identifying some of the store owners that are interested in participating, and some suggestion about what that compensation might look like, so that we could then, at the next meeting, then we can actually approve that. So there's sort of a next step in the model process. That would be awesome.
And I want to make sure that whatever we propose, it ends up being long-term sustainable, because we wouldn't want future stores to not participate because they're not getting compensated the same way previous stores were, or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, and right. Yeah, no, I think that the grant, whatever the grant program is that we develop, I would hope that the pilot people, they get that, but then I would hope that we'd be able to open that grant up to a larger phase where other stores could participate, so that it expands. But they're getting compensated for their time and energy to actually be a part of developing the model. Carissa?
Yeah, I would just say around that concern, I think looking back at the presentation that Brandy gave, the Miami Gardens model did a really good job of the voluntary participation, but with the tiered approach, basically how invested a store wants to be kind of determines the level of incentive that they're granted. And so it makes it a little bit more equitable in meeting people where they're at. And they were a pretty innovative model. So just if you're looking for some guidance around how to do that, even
I
within,
remember.
even within the working group capacity, I think, and I can provide the contacts, the folks down there let us attend their monthly meetings. Kathleen has actually attended some, and I'm very grateful to Kathleen for doing so. So let me know if I can provide any contacts.
Great. Well, I know we're getting really close to the end of our potential meeting. I don't want to overrun too late, so I'm going to move on if everyone's okay, and if you all feel like you have the guidance you need. And we're going to go to the community grocery store update, and I'm going to turn it over to either, I guess, Bobby or Carissa to provide us with an update on the community grocery store project. Carissa?
So sorry, Commissioner Prizia, I just had one question of clarification on the last item. Regarding the presentation that Deidre provided, city staff capacity or resources were listed as a possibility. So I'm just wondering, I know you guys can't give direction because we don't have city commissioners, but I just want to understand what my team's expectation is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was exactly the reason why it says possibly, because we didn't know. I mean, we can't say, Brandy, you're going to work on this, from the county's perspective, or, I mean, I know that she's already put a lot of work into this with her original research, but if that's something that, I guess that would be something that the city would need to make a decision. So I don't know how we can do that. Am I allowed to email the committee members to ask them if they're,
Probably should do that through staff.
okay. So, Sean, if you don't mind connecting with either Raina or Desmond, the committee members, to see about if they're okay with city, or if they can get permission for city team members to participate in that committee. Does that work for you, Carissa?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to create more confusion. I just want to make sure that I'm doing my part and my team is doing our part. So, yep, that works. Thank you.
Awesome. Do you want to take it away with the grocery store update, or Ms. Griffin, do you? Sorry.
I think Krista can go ahead and lead that part of the conversation if she's able.
I am. You have to bear with me. My 19-month-old is saying, "Mom, it's 7. Why are you still working?" I apologize, everyone. But in terms of the grocery store update, we don't have too much of an update for you. As I mentioned at the previous meeting, there was an ask by the development team to have a 90-day pause on the process so that they could go and conduct some more community engagement. And they are in the process of doing so, where the ask of that pause started on September 1st. And so December 1st would be the end of those 90 days. I have received just a few emails back and forth, and I am aware that they plan to partner with staff at the Chamber of Commerce, as well as State Representative Yvonne Hayes-Hinson, to get some assistance with their community engagement process. But really the city is kind of still in our 90-day pause period on moving things forward until we've gotten further confirmation from the development team as to whether or not they intend to move forward with the endeavor. And then the only other piece to that puzzle is next week on Tuesday, the 19th, there will be the discussion of ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act dollars. And so as the project had been looking at a $3.3 million loan utilizing potentially ARPA funding, that conversation may come up, likely will come up next Tuesday amongst the city commissioners. And so more to come based on the outcomes of that. Bobby, anything further that you want to add to that?
No, I think you caught it all. So just to summarize part of that, right? The city hasn't been taking any action, just waiting for that 90-day pause to come to a close.
So can I ask a question about that? When that 90 days ends on December 1st, there's two options. One is that the developer says, we're going full steam ahead, we're doing this project. they've already been awarded a $3.3 million, so then, and you guys are, they have not already been awarded it, and they're working on the agreement?
Correct.
So they have been awarded it, but they haven't signed an agreement yet?
They have not been awarded and the agreement has not been written.
They
So-
have not been awarded.
Right, so the money would, what would take place next Tuesday, to my understanding, would be that there would be, if we get to the point where there is a contract that is agreed upon by all parties, that then the city commission has agreed that a $3.3 million loan is allowable. And so that money would be there for that purpose. But the 90-day pause was on everything in terms of further work on the contract terms, the due diligence process, all of it. And so I think to Bobby's point, the money would be there and potentially ready, but all of the processes of making sure we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars still needs to take place. And so there may be the potential that it does not, that $3.3 million that was allowed is not ever enacted for the project. Bobby, is that an accurate depiction?
I don't think I would use the term allowed. I think part of the conversation next week is doling out all of the money for ARPA into the buckets. And so that's the initial conversation, is does the commission still want to put and assign money to that particular project, recognizing that we haven't been able to make a lot of progress in the documents and the other process to actually award the money. So this is just seeing if the commission still wants to assign that money and sort of earmark it. And then, as Chris had mentioned, waiting to hear from the development team if they still want to move forward with the project.
Okay, so assuming the commission still wants to fund something that's on hold, but potentially a yes, and then they do fund it, and then the developer comes back and says, forget it, I'm not doing the project, then the city still has that $3.3 million in a bucket potentially, and then that conversation would potentially come back to this committee to have a conversation about what we might do to move forward with a new conversation about a community grocery store, or how would
Commissioner,
that?
I think that's too many steps down the line for Chris and I to foresee how it would actually work. I think we just have probably some confidence to say if the city were not to fund this particular project, the money could, to your point, either go and towards a different project similar to this, providing food access, or go back in the bucket and provide other types of projects that would have already been funded through other projects that would already been funded using ARPA funds.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I guess being that we don't have any of the city commissioners here today, we'll just have to wait on that conversation for our November meeting. But it would be great at the November meeting to have a robust update about the community grocery store and what the decision was made in terms of funding for that project, and if there's an update from the developer about any outreach he's done, and if he's, like, if there's any updates from that, and then if there's if it is funded, if there's a desire for this board to continue being an active part of it, because if not, then we can cross it off our list. And if, you know what I mean, and if so, then in what ways should we plan to engage in that, so I can make sure we keep it we keep it on the agenda and keep it moving forward. That would be awesome. Update from the Good Food Purchasing Program. We have 4 minutes for this, so we'll see.
All right, Madam Chair, as you know, last week the Sheriff's Office engaged with staff and the Good Food Purchasing Program. They are issuing out some memorandums to their food service provider, Aramark, to release information to them for their initial analysis. So we're hopeful that very soon we'll start getting data shared so that we can begin our analytics with the Good Food Purchasing Program. We've got a couple of months before the jail's request for proposal goes out for a new food service contract over the summer of 2022. So we're chomping at the bit to begin our work. It looks as if things are moving forward, though.
Excellent,
Nice.
Sean, thank you so much for
Good
that hard
work.
work. I know that's been a heavy lift for everyone, and I really, really appreciate it. I'm excited that the school board stuff is really moving forward and it's seeming to do a lot of good over there in terms of being able to identify new areas as well. So very exciting stuff on both fronts. Dr. Campbell, I know it seems like UF is not adopting good food purchasing as a framework for their RFP, but are you able to give us any updates, or at the next meeting, update us on what UF is doing with regards to metrics for dining services?
I can reach out to them and find out what they're thinking. My understanding at this point is that they're wanting to look at what the people who put in bids are proposing. That is my understanding, and I can reach out to them to see what they're thinking in terms of, putting some teeth to those bids.
Yeah, when will they be done with negotiate? Do you know when their negotiation, is their negotiation starting now?
My understanding was that they didn't receive the bids until like the 6th or 7th. And so they're just now kind of digging into them.
Okay.
That was the last I heard.
Okay, so maybe December before you could give us an update on that then, possibly. Okay, all right. And community education, plant of the month.
All right, well, plant of the month this month is strawberries. And I know you guys are all growing your collard greens very successfully, right? Anyway, what's that?
I didn't say anything. Wasn't me.
Anyway, this month is strawberries, and one of the problems was that strawberry plants haven't been available for the number of people that wanted to plant them, which is a problem I kind of anticipated, but IFAS really wanted to do strawberries. I ordered 1,000 strawberry plants, and I'm trying to get a couple of master gardeners to work with me to do a demonstration planting and then a distribution of those plants to folks, to families, whoever. And what I'm trying to get some feedback on is a good location to do that.
The distribution?
Mm-hmm.
You might reach out to Grow Hub. They're a plant nursery, and they have other foods and plants, and they might be excited about the idea that people could come pick up there, and then they maybe would do a little shopping and pick up some herbs to go.
Oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about. I didn't want to mess with but they
don't sell strawberries, so you won't.
Yeah, that's right. I won't be competing.
No, you'll be attracting business there. So I would reach out to Grow Hub and see David Baines or Melissa Desada to see if.
I know Melissa, so.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Any other questions or comments or new business that's not on the agenda, announcements or?
This is Kathleen. I haven't been over to the Smoky Bear Park to see the fruit trees that were planted there, but I did see an article someone shared from the New York Times. There was an article written by some health professionals that work in Philadelphia, I believe, and they've done a study on the correlation of tree planting and a reduction in violence. And I wonder if fruit tree planting in neighborhoods could be considered in the future so that, there would be food. I understand that there would have to be some kind of community caretakers of the trees. But Carissa, do you have any update on the Smokey the Bear trees?
Yeah, that's one of our edible grove projects. So we have one out at Smoky Bear Park, another one out at Fred Cone Park, and then a third one will be coming online for Southwest Boulevard, Southwest 40th Boulevard, I apologize. And so the trees are planted, they're growing. We have over 100 fruit and nut trees out there. They're taking some 5th graders out there next week to learn more about them. We have Alachua County, Keep Alachua County Beautiful volunteers assisting. Eric Conan, who is the city horticulturalist, gets all the credit because he did a great job of sourcing them. But in my previous life, I did a lot of research around community gardens and just edible landscaping. And yes, there is definitely, from what I have seen, a correlation between edible landscaping and growing spaces in neighborhoods to reduce crime, violence, and increase neighborhood cohesion. So that's an update, I suppose.
I would love to get a copy of that article, Kathleen, or at least a link to it. And I do want to say that as this Plant of the Month thing progresses, the goal is to incorporate fruit trees and shrubs and perennials. So, and to increase that neighborhood cohesion so that people, can talk about their plants over the fence. And
Great, sure. Well, I know that we did a planting in Jonesville where we put in in our Jonesville Park, we put in a number of fruit trees as well. So maybe at that same conversation around the growth management stuff in the new year, we could also get our Parks and Recs together to talk about what they have done and what the possibilities are for the future around edibles in our landscape.
And I made that suggestion with regard to solar buffers as well, fruit trees.
Awesome.
So I think it's not just landscapes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and buffers and roadsides and things like that. So excellent. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time and for sticking with us, even though we're technically a workshop today. And Dr. Campbell, I'm sorry you couldn't be confirmed today, and Dr. Fuentes again, but we will get you all confirmed at our next, hopefully at our next meeting. We'll have quorum. So thank you for sticking with us, and we're doing good work here, y'all. So thank you to the team, and a special thank you to GeoPlan for all their work on the map. Please send my regards to Crystal as well, and we really, really appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Oh yeah, go for it. We have a public who would like to comment, so if you want to stick around, I think we lost Catherine, but that's okay.
some people were needing to go.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I didn't realize you had separate comments. I apologize. I would have done a
No,
public
Yeah,
comment.
she has some good stuff to share.
Always.
So Nancy Darren, just a couple of things. I just had an email come in. There's going to be a nutrition security roundtable in Vermont that has some really interesting looking stuff on it. I am trying to get signed up to listen in, but if other people want to, should I share that out anywhere?
Absolutely.
If it's through USDA, but
So we don't have, the best way to probably be to get it to, Carissa, are you still doing the Food Systems Coalition email list?
We have monthly newsletters that are sent out. So I encourage any community partners who have updates to give us information through there.
Yeah, maybe we could put it on our food policy. Yeah.
And is it, I'm okay if I send an email to all of you on the committee, you just can't,
We have to respond to you, we can't respond to each other. So.
Right, but I am not violating anything if I send to all the individuals that, okay. So the one, I am so excited.
If you want to be ultra safe, line carbon copy them. Because
Yeah, okay.
then they can't inadvertently hit reply all.
That's okay, because sometimes I do that and sometimes I don't, but I will be more careful. So I'm really excited about the Foodshed mapping. I was so excited to see all the initial farms through in those corridors and stuff. Two thoughts around that is that the whole global supply chain, neoliberal, fossil fuel-oriented world is coming apart at the seams, and one of the natural gas and oil prices, natural gas prices in the UK are up 638% over the last year, 628% in Europe, 455% in Europe, 122% in the US. And we don't hear much about it, but natural gas is used to make fertilizer, and our whole food system is, for the most part, based on synthetics and chemicals, right? And so fertilizer factories in the UK, North America are shutting down all over. We're already having issues because of droughts and floods and lack of food. So this is so much bigger than it's so much bigger for all of us, not only our food insecure or stress vulnerable, most vulnerable people. So, I was just reading an article about the U.S. supply chain woes that are leaving schools scrambling to feed kids because so much is commodity stuff. So that food mapping and seeing that we have a school system that's looking at good food purchasing, local food purchasing, what we're doing. I mean, it's so much bigger than just even the food insecure piece. And one of our farmers I was just talking to at the market on Saturday, all his zucchini came in this week, and the school board wants it next week.
It'll keep coming.
So, yes, it will. But anyway, developing more and more ways that we can do the meat processing, that we can have these circular systems, it is timely. It is really timely because this is not going to it's going to wobble all over, but we've entered a new era, and I think we're in what this work is so key to disaster management, to just thriving, to keeping the peace and building trust and community and restoring local economy. So that multiplier effect, and I'll shut up because everybody needs to go home and feed their babies.
I wanted to bring up this email that Nancy sent right before the meeting.
Yeah.
This is USDA Rural Development. They're talking about access to capital in rural America for non-regulated lenders. I'm curious if the county could be a non-regulated lender.
So, well, that's an interesting question, if we became a CDFI, but that's one of the, you've probably heard me talk about it on my platform.
Oh, I have talked about the
constantly.
community banking and all of that.
And I think that's what this is, a CDFA or a CDFI, sort of like this,
Well, they
that's non-accredited, so
They list a whole bunch of different
options. That's
But
interesting.
Anyway,
Anna,
here's a copy of it.
Well, did she send it just to you?
I don't know.
CDFI, actually, even though most of them are credit unions or nonprofits, there are different ways to create them. So I don't know if there's any potential there as well.
I don't know,
Again,
but if there's a way to help our local rural farms to, with the
And
opportunity
if
for
we
farming
could
money.
get Yvonne or get somebody to start working on changing the Florida statute that allowed a credit union.
I'm working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
That's happening. So totally aside, so
Yeah.
we'll leave it for after the
Okay,
meeting,
I'm
but I can
sorry.
share that I guess what they're talking about is banking and access to lending for farmers and small business owners, and oftentimes banks are more risky. Like those kinds of loans are more risky, so traditional banks can't do them. But a community development finance institution can, and so we've been having a lot of dialogue in the community about trying to attract a CDFI here so that we have that financial tool to be able to support that kind of community development.
I think there are some comments there, and Sean, would you mind clicking on the photos of Monique's Candyland just while people are still talking?
Well, with this, I'm gonna let the meeting formally adjourn, so those that need to get to their 19-month-olds and to their families, Mr. Swain and others who've been so generously giving us their time. I really thank you all for being here, and we will see you all on November 10th. Same bat place, same black channel.
This is that store? Oh, wow. I've seen that. I've driven by it. I just never even thought about going in and looking.
That is not the Chevron. That's a separate. I'm just unfamiliar with that store completely.
That's like a home good refrigerator.
Yeah.
This is like, I've driven by this place. I did not realize that's what they were trying to do. This is like somebody going to Sam's and buying stuff and putting it on the shelf and reselling it. Which, people I think have been doing from their living rooms in many places around town for a while now.
Interesting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's interesting. I'll have to go in there.
Thanks, Kathleen. That was
Thank you, Kathleen.
Well, thank you all. Carissa did add to the chat the question as to whether she could make a presentation in an upcoming meeting about efforts to reduce food waste and to increase food recovery. So that's
Okay, I'll
something.
add that to the list.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Great meeting.